Okay. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm very excited. I can't even tell you how excited I am because I have followed Dr. Cassandra Quave for some time on her podcast, Foodie Pharmacology. I'm always watching it every day when I start to do all my core work after my yoga and meditation. So first off, welcome, Dr. Cassandra Quave.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to read a little bit of her bio, and then we're going to just jump into some questions and answers because this should be like a 5-hour show here. Dr. Cassandra Quave, PhD, is a scientist, author, speaker, podcast host, a wife, a mother, explorer, a professor at Emory University School of Medicine. She teaches college courses and leads a group of research scientists studying medicinal plants to find new life-saving drugs from nature. And that's going to be the thrust of our talk here. But Dr. Cassandra Quave is the curator of the herbarium and associate professor of dermatology and human health at Emory. She was appointed the Thomas J. Lawley, MD, professor of dermatology and endowed professorship in 2023. She was also appointed assistant dean of research for Emory University School of Medicine in 2023. That was a busy year. And Dr. Quave has earned degrees in biology and anthropology from Emory in 2000 and a PhD in biology in 2008 from Florida International University. As I mentioned at the start, she hosts the Foodie Pharmacology podcast, and she writes the Nature Pharmacy newsletter to share the science that she knows so well behind natural medicines. And she also has this book that I've been just loving reading. It's called The Plant Hunter, and it explores a lot of the topics that we'll talk about today. But it's a great read. So thank you. And I also signed up for your Substack, so I'm all in. Welcome. So I'll just say cheers. So I don't know if you got my little gift too, but I hope that arrived.
I did. I got the beautiful spoon. Actually, thank you.
Oh yay!
Yes.
All right. So when I address you, is it appropriate to say Dr. Cassandra or Dr. Quave or Dr. Cassandra Quave?
You can just call me Cassandra. It's fine.
I have to tell you, I told my massage therapist last week that I so love that name so much. And it's always one of the protagonists in the novel that I'm writing, but I just love it. How did you get your name?
My mom was, I guess, a fan of Greek history, and so she enjoyed the name. Yeah.
So all of this is a homage to Cassandra, being an ethnobotanist. So my tablescape that I did was, I had a ladies' lunch the other day, but lots of green and lots of plants.
Beautiful.
I feel like I'm sitting in this little forest, and also being a horticulturist myself. So that's very, very dear to me. But for a lot of people, I mean, I really never knew what an ethnobotanist was, but I did work at Brooklyn Botanic Garden and New York Botanic Garden, where I also taught. And I knew Dr. Michael Balick. I don't know if you know him from New York.
He's my academic grandfather through
Oh,
the academic tree. Yes.
oh my God. So you know him. So he's always like a big hero of mine. But most people don't know what an ethnobotanist is. I was just saying earlier, today's the Feast of St. Blaise. I just had my throat blessed. Oh, and this my godchild made for me, so it's all like green leaves. But if you can explain to the audience, what is an ethnobotanist and why do we care?
Yeah. So ethnobotanists are scientists that study the connections between humans and nature. So we're interested in how people use plants for food, for medicine, for art, for construction. It's basically any way that people use plants to enhance their ability to survive in different environments across the globe.
Well, then why, like, what's so different about an ethnobotanist, say, to a horticulturist or just a plant lover?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, ethnobotanists are really interested in that human connection.
Mm.
Um, I am definitely not a horticulturalist. I am an aspiring gardener, as they say. I'm still learning my way around the garden. Um, but we know a lot about how to identify plants and how to engage with different cultures and different cultural traditions. That's kind of, I think, would be the difference between
I,
those.
I mean, that is fascinating to me. The novel that I'm writing involves a lot of that, like the indigenous population in parts of Mexico and
Mhm.
the Nayo. no yoga treaty. So I want to ask you about that in a little bit. But I have to ask first, I was going to ask, do you have a garden?
I do have a garden, yes.
Okay. Do you
And
grow?
it's a backyard garden. We have
Yeah.
vegetables. I have a lot of medicinal herbs. Actually, my herbs are the one group of plants I'm actually very good at growing because they're much more hardy. We grow lots of mints.
Yeah,
So I have
yeah.
peppermint and catnip and lemon balm and lavender and rosemary. Um, I also grow tulsi or holy basil.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yeah.
I mean, that's good, especially for your cocktails. So, I've written a book.
Hmm.
Also, that garden to glass element is very dear.
Yes.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your research, and what part of your world, like how much time do you spend with that out in the field, in the lab, the herbarium?
Yeah, so I'm trained as a medical ethnobotanist. So I'm very interested in specifically how people use plants as medicine. And then what I think that we do that's unique is that we then bring in a very strong scientific perspective to understanding how and why these plants work against different types of diseases. So I'm most interested in looking for new therapies to treat infectious disease. So, for example, we have a lot of projects working on new solutions for drug resistant infections, whether
Mm,
it's bacterial or viral in origin or fungal in origin. We've done a work on staph infections, we've worked on fungal infections, we've worked on COVID 19, just a lot of different types of infectious disease targets. And so my work is kind of split between the field, so working out in the woods or out in the wild in nature, trying to both document which medicinal plants are used to treat infections and inflammatory disease, collecting those. We deposit those specimens in a place called the herbarium. An herbarium is, you can think of it like a museum of plants. So this is not a living collection. These are dried and pressed. And when properly cared for, herbarium specimens can last at least 5 centuries. That's how old some of our oldest specimens are on Earth. And they serve as a record of that plant in space and time. That's incredibly valuable to helping us understand not only kind of biodiversity and where plants are distributed, but also ensuring that we have the right identity of the species that we're studying in the chemistry lab. And so back in the chemistry lab, we tease apart these thousands of different metabolites. Even a single plant leaf may contain thousands of distinct molecules. And so if you envision it as, within that leaf is a haystack full of straw, what we really are good at is teasing apart the bits of the haystack to determine, which needles in the haystack are responsible for the medicinal properties of those herbs. And then in our pharmacology lab, we work on, again, on these superbugs, on these drug resistant infections, and also on human cell lines to make sure that not only are these compounds working against these infections, but also to determine if they're safe to use in human cells.
um, so my husband and I, we used to have a place in Aruba, but we went to many of the other islands, also into Costa Rica, and frequently we would
Mhm.
see representatives of the pharmaceutical companies out there when we would take the hikes into the, rainforest or the woods or things there. And so they were, taking, I remember it was cat's claw and some other things that they were looking at that they thought would be very useful. Um, back in. So do you find that you're working with the pharmaceutical companies, or are you independent of them, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of misperceptions of big pharma in natural products right now. I would argue that they're not very interested, unfortunately, in natural products,
Mm,
especially not for infectious disease. The big programs that look for new antibiotics have basically all shut down in large
mm,
pharmaceutical industry. The
mm.
folks that are looking for ingredients though are within the dietary supplement market, which is a multi-billion-dollar market um, that fuels a lot of these over-the-counter health supplements that people consume. And there I think are some bigger concerns in that domain, especially with regards to fair trade, of ensuring appropriate compensation of local people where these plants are being sourced from.
Uh,
But with our work, we are not funded by pharmaceutical companies, but our hope is very much to, discover new molecules in nature that can someday be developed into new medicines. I mean, I think that nature does hold a lot of the answers.
Mhm.
It's not a simple solution to get to. It takes a lot of time and a lot of funding to
Mhm.
go from looking at a plant leaf to actually identifying not only which molecules could become, drug-like compounds, but also how they work and if they're safe. Um, it can take between 800 million to $1 billion to bring a new drug to market. And so that's really beyond the scope of what you can achieve in an academic lab. What
Right.
we do, however, is we're really good at kind of narrowing down the field of looking for possible agents that could be developed into drugs and kind of trying to get them a little bit further down.
Sorry.
I
So,
do have two startup companies, one of which is focused on natural products for kind of non-healing wounds in bandaging, and another is targeting different infectious and inflammatory skin diseases. And so our hope is that through these startup companies coming out of academic scientific innovation, that we can move these discoveries a little bit further down the road with the hopes that they will be developed someday into drugs. But it's a very long path.
it's a long path. So, like you're the front line, so to speak. But what you said, you have two companies, the startups.
Mhm.
And what was the first one? Non-human looms? I didn't understand that.
So yeah, so if you can think about patients that are, for example, in nursing care facilities that can develop bed sores or perhaps have
Uh,
not the best circulation. I'm thinking, for example, patients that have diabetes, and you can get these wounds on your skin that, they don't heal over very well. And one of the reasons they don't heal is they also get microbes in the wound bed
mhm.
that prevent that skin from coming back together. So we're working on solutions to help those wounds heal in a more efficient way.
I see. I misheard. I thought you said loom, but you said wounds.
Wound,
O.
sorry.
I got that. You have your Florida accent or your a Georgia accent, I guess. And then the other one was with the infectious diseases. I mean, I read with fascination. I was telling him at a dinner party the other night that I think I read you said that there hasn't been anything developed since like the 1980s
That's right.
for
There's
antibacterial.
no new antibiotic class has been discovered and brought to market since the last new discovery was in 1984.
That seems impossible with all the plethora of research and pharmaceuticals, even if they aren't in it for that, but especially the world today and the way things spread, no?
Yeah, I think there's a number of reasons that this has happened. First of all, it's very difficult to find a new antibiotic class. It's a very scientifically challenging. But the main driver, I think, of a lot of this has been an economic challenge.
Mm,
So, when you're developing a new antibiotic, antibiotics are not a good economic bet. In fact, there have been companies that have gotten drugs approved and then, gone bankrupt within weeks after FDA approval because the costs are so high for post market, basically, once they're released, of these monitoring costs. Just the economy of how antibiotics are developed and sold is not conducive to income generation or to making money. It's much more lucrative from a pharmaceutical industry perspective to develop drugs that are taken throughout your lifetime. So drugs, for example, for heart disease or drugs for diabetes,
uh,
um, drugs
I
targeting weight loss, these things that you have to take every day.
I see.
That's where they can make income. With antibiotics, the hope is that you use them and then you're done with them very quickly,
Yeah,
right? You're not supposed to be on antibiotics for a very long time.
hopefully. I mean, I believe people take them too indiscriminately, or they're, prescribed too indiscriminately. But at the same time that you're discovering new plants, are there new diseases or new infections that come about? So are you looking back to solve things, or are you looking ahead to what's, you know,
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that with climate change, where we're seeing changing dynamics in our ecosystems, that's important not only for our plants, but also obviously for microbes. And so, one prediction is that we're going to see more of these fungal infections that you might see more commonly in the tropics. You might see those in more what have been traditionally more temperate zones. We're
right?
very much interested in new and emerging infections, especially regarding kind of aggressive or drug resistant infections. One of the fungal infections that we've done a lot of work on recently is a fungus known as Candida auris. And this is a very dangerous fungal pathogen if you are infected with it in your bloodstream, which can happen to patients that are immune compromised. For example, if you're getting chemotherapy, there's up to a 60% mortality rate. That's six
Oh my
zero.
gosh.
So we really don't have very many good therapies, especially for these aggressive fungal infections. And this is something near and dear to my heart. I have family members that have recently been battling cancer. I have know people in my life that I love and care for that are immune compromised. And these types of infections that are new in the field are very alarming.
Yeah, to me too. And I, have always sworn by like we have our own body's defenses based on our environment, but with climate chaos, I can see it in the garden and horticulture, different, you know, insects and things that come in or different pathogens that are there. I mean, even recently myself with the best of plans, but I was recently diagnosed with a autoimmune, and that's
Hmm.
sort of left me a little unmoored about some things, and so sort of plot ahead. But I think it's just a changing world. And I think there's such a need for the work that you do. And it's so fast. I mean, when I was choosing a career, I'll say I didn't even know about an ethnobotanist. And I would, I mean, well, I guess a two-part question for you is that, what would the Cassandra of today tell the young Cassandra? And in turn, what would you tell young girls or women today if they might not know about it either, how to pursue a career here.
Yeah, I think it's important, whatever you decide to do with your career, is to pursue your passion. And the hardest part is not necessarily about pursuing that passion, it's about discovering that passion.
Mm.
And so I have been known to tell students to really, when they finish college, is go out and experience the world. If they're not sure of what they want to do, I have, I've had students get on one-way tickets to Africa, for example, and go and spend years there building out water systems and communities, and then finding a passion in kind of NGO work. I've had students go and do lots of different things. I think we have to get out there and experience it. There's only so much that you can learn from in a classroom and from books. I mean, that kind of knowledge is fundamentally critical. But what you can learn, I think, through just life experiences and getting out there is even more important in some ways.
I think that's such wonderful advice. I read about that too, but especially for today when people do so much of their living vicariously online, and stay in their own little worlds as opposed to going out and I think honing or developing their curiosity and discovering whole new worlds. Which kind of leads into this is that how do you balance your work and your family? And then I read, so I can bring it up. Usually the polite me wouldn't, but then it's talking about, I think Kirkus book said you also balance your disability with your quest for knowledge for the infection. So family and fun, or work and family, and yeah, all that. How do you?
We have a very busy household. I'll say that. I mean, it's we have four kids. Three are biological kids. One is my biological nephew who we adopted
Oh,
um, when he was a teenager. I've got older teens now. One of them's in college. One's finishing high school soon, and then I have another in high school, and then another in elementary school. So we have quite a spread with lots of different things happening. I think this is the other piece of advice I always give to my students too is really, when you're looking for a partner in life, ensuring that that partner is supportive and shares your vision of what you hope for. I think some of the biggest challenges I've seen, especially women face in science, has been because there's a lack of infrastructure within the system itself to really support women coming up in science. And if you're lacking both that support infrastructure within the industry, and you're lacking that support infrastructure at home, you don't have a chance. So at least by having support at home, you have a chance. And things have improved over time, but it still can be very challenging. So I think I'm a scrapper. I'm a scrappy kind of scientist. I kind of I'm unafraid today to fight for what I think is necessary.
Yeah.
But not everybody's built like that, right?
No.
And so that's given me a little bit of an advantage because I do, kind of push my way forward when I have to.
Mhm.
Um, it shouldn't be that hard though. So I think there's a lot that we can do from a systems perspective to help women find more balance. Especially regarding childcare, um, having maternity leave. I never once had maternity leave with any of my children. I recall very clearly, doing work while I was still on painkillers after one of my C-sections. I mean, this is a part of the change that we need to see happen. And it can't just happen one university at a time. It needs to happen on a national level. I mean, this is the kind of legislation that we need to really push for
Yes.
is more rights for parental support to support people in the workforce, because if we don't support a diversified workforce, our workforce is going to be very weak no matter what sector of industry we're in. So
I mean,
I think
plus
that's something that
you're
we
a
can do.
role model. You're a role model for your children, for them to be able to see. I mean, I share your passion for things. I mean, I often say that I'm fearless, not foolish, but
Yeah.
you want to be able to go ahead, with a little bit of support for it. So yeah, when you have that, family behind you is very meaningful. Do you think your children will go into, no pun intended, into the field that you're in?
They've come in the field many times with me on field expeditions. But it's not their passion. I
Yeah.
think that they love the outdoors, but they each have their own unique, you know,
Well,
desires and their own unique ways of looking in the world. And I really try and celebrate that because each child is an individual.
yeah.
And so I have one child that's very interested in art, one that wants to go into business, one is thinking law. The littlest one wants to become an army general, and I think that's because, he just wants to
It's like,
boss
I
people
mean,
around.
that he's like, I get it. Do you think I wish there was another word for it, but do you think your disability helped propel you to be such an inspiring leader?
Um, I
'Cause
think my journey with disability has given me a fortitude that has helped in some ways. It's kind of like,
maybe you can explain for the viewers what it is that you over.
yeah, so that's a great point. Okay, so I mean, I was born with multiple disabilities or multiple deformities of my skeletal system. So I was born missing bones in my right leg. My right femur was very short. My tibia was very short. My hip developed problems. I had really bad scoliosis to the point where they had to do several surgeries on my back in when I hit puberty. So I've had more than 2 dozen orthopedic surgeries over my lifetime, and that required a lot of time spent in the hospital. I dealt with a lot of bullying when I was a child. um you know it was not an easy childhood, and it wasn't an easy teenhood, and it wasn't an easy 20s, really, even into the 30s. So I feel like kind of when I hit 35, it was at that point that I started to feel a bit more comfortable within my own skin, if that makes sense, and more confident. um, but it was a journey, and I
Yeah.
think that that journey, as difficult as it was, has helped me to become more comfortable, um, in speaking up for things that I'm passionate about, for really trying to help others with the hand up that are dealing with similar challenges. And I think in many ways I was very lucky that I've lived with disability my entire life. It's a very different thing to become disabled later in life
Mm,
it
I-
is to grow with it. I can give you a simple example of something that I have had difficulty adjusting to, and that's my eyesight. I've always had perfect vision, never a problem with my vision. And when I hit 45, my eyes started failing me, and I've had to, use readers, and I have progressives, and it has not been an easy adjustment for me.
the
It really,
French have a word for that, something like a quarante tres, like when you turn 43, that's when your eyes start to go.
right? It's just so that's, a small
Yeah,
thing, but it's been a big change for me.
yeah.
Um, that, and so
Yeah, but
adjusting
you could have gone
time.
sideways. I mean, some people turn out to be very bitter. So the fact that you have not only risen above, but then you're successful, wearing all these different hats. So, God bless you and thank you for that. So I have to ask, which one of your hats gives you the greatest pleasure? Writing the books or the podcast or, being a professor or.
That's a great question. I think it's the fact that I have the freedom to wear
Yeah.
all the different hats that makes me happy. Because there are, I mean, I think that's a privilege, right? It's a privilege
Yeah.
that I have so much flexibility in my work, that I can spend time writing, that I can spend time speaking with other experts, that people actually want to listen or read, what I write about, or
Sure.
listen to what I say. I take that as a huge privilege and a huge responsibility,
Mm.
right? Because I've been, you know, had the opportunity to really, over a period of, more than 20 years, build
Mm.
up this knowledge base of expertise in this field. And I'm happy to share that with people. So, but it's also important that what I communicate as a scientist is accurate and is
Yes.
understandable, and that's a big responsibility, but I do enjoy it.
I have to say that reminds. I have two points that I want to make to you. That you have a natural talent for taking a topic. I mean, I have a little bit vested in it, so I understand. But for anybody to make it, to have such clarity, and then to make it relevant to people, so you do that very well. Because some people
Thank
might
you.
say, "I didn't even know about that." So how do I? So then that brings up, how do you pick your guests? And then do you study or read their books like I do, or how do you prepare to ask those salient questions?
That's great for the podcast. Yeah, sometimes the topics, I have a lot of episodes on fermentation and food and health because I'm just personally very interested in that. So I tend to gravitate towards, things that I'm interested in. I've gotten guests based on workshops that I've paid to attend, and was just blown away by these authors or these workshop leaders. I've found guests through, scientific conferences that I've attended, where I've just been like, thought, wow, this is really interesting science. And I bet more people beyond this small group of scientists in this room would really love to learn about it. Sometimes it's books that I'm interested in reading. I mean, very selfishly, it's kind of just things that draw my attention, that I'm interested in, that have drawn my attention. And it's a great way to feed my huge hunger for books, because I get free
Right.
books sent to me all the time, and
Oh, that's
so it feeds
fantastic.
my book habit.
Oh, that's fantastic. Do you have when was this book published? When was the Plant Hunter first
think
published?
so. The Plant Hunter was published in the fall of 2021. Difficult time for a new book to come out because it was still in the pandemic. We didn't really have a classic book tour at the time, but it really was such a wonderful
You can bring it.
journey.
Yeah.
Publishing it a year later, in 2022, the paperback version came out. And then soon after, there are actually editions of it that are written in Mandarin in Taiwan.
Oh, really?
And I was recently in Japan in May, and I, was able to see and firsthand in the bookstore versions of this in Japanese. And so that was really exciting to be able to know that, my journey, this little story I've told of how my life in science has come about, was being shared in different languages, was really, really, really exciting thing
Yes.
to
Very,
experience.
very rewarding. Yes. So, when you look to the future, what do you think it looks like for you? Will you be doing more of this exciting, work that you're doing, or is there something that you're like, I've always wanted to blank?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things that I have on the burner. I'm very interested in writing my next book, which I'm thinking will focus more broadly on different themes of health, but through the lens of plants and through the lens of traditional medicine. That's kind of something I'm working on a proposal for now. Um, I'm also, really interested in doing more science communication. I've been working on trying to get a documentary series off the ground,
Mm.
um, that would tie into a lot of the themes that are described in the book. And then, I'm busy running my lab. I mean, I have a large group of 20 people that work with me, and we are doing some really cool science. I'm also excited to continue to contribute my expertise to the startup companies,
Yeah,
um, and kind of hopefully see those products move along. But in all these initiatives, I think it's important. I have my fingers in many different pots, or many different pies, but
or pies.
there are incredible people that I have the chance to work with that are all involved in this. So whereas I'm kind of the face of much of this, there are many people working behind the scenes,
Yeah.
bringing this vision to life. And I think that's really important to clarify.
It is. Well, you're very inspiring, and obviously, it takes a team to be able to do all this leadership that you provide in this great work. Um, I have to ask you, as someone who wrote the book, The Art of the Garnish, do you have a favorite cocktail?
A favorite cocktail. I love um, making things myself at home, kind of like playing around with different cocktails. One thing that I've really enjoyed was a recipe that a friend shared with me, which is basically a fig leaf liqueur, where you can take some fresh fig leaves and cook them, boil them in a simple syrup, and let that cool overnight. And then you basically mix this sugary, figgy leaf mixture with gin, and it's really nice just over ice or with a little bit of soda water. I really like that. But I'm also a big fan of spirits. I've traveled a lot in the UK, and I've really enjoyed visiting different whiskey distilleries. I'm a fan of a very peaty whiskey. So it's
Oh,
kind of a masculine drink, I guess, but I just really love the robustness and like the
yeah, me
layers of
too.
flavor.
Yeah,
And it makes me think of the Highlands.
yeah. I go to a lot of the food and drink, events here in New York City, and they
Mhm.
would love, I mean, they're appealing to women, so they don't think of it as very masculine or muscular in that way. But women like that, like as you say, that very robust flavor. I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of what propelled me to write The Art of the Garnish is that, I come at everything from the plant standpoint, and almost
Hmm.
spirit is a plant, and people don't realize that, from potato vodka to peaty, whatever,
Yeah.
the whiskeys, and your the gin is fabulous because it's like so many different botanicals that are in
So
there.
many botanicals. Yeah.
And I did at some points I did like pairing with the food, so it's funny, I know you did a recent, at least I listened to it recently on the podcast, talking about the cassava plant, and that was
Hmm.
always my favorite dessert when I was young. My birthday was like tapioca pudding, but these
Yeah.
boba pearls, most people don't know they come from cassava. So I made that as
Yeah.
a drink. It was really fun.
It's
Yeah.
fun. I mean, and it's incredible because that plant feeds
Yeah.
like a huge portion of people all across the tropics, from South America into all throughout like Africa. It's incredible how important that is as a food crop for
It
people.
really is. I made a little, like in the heart shaped casserole that I made, this food to go with it as an appetizer called Rooting for Love. So that was
Oh, that's great.
my root plant or whatever. I can't believe the time is like going so fast here. But I have two quick things. Is that I read that you were talking about the herbarium at Duke that they're
Yeah.
going to do away with. Now it broke my heart when when BBG did away with their herbarium and scientists and gave it all to NYBG. And even though it's been a couple of years since then, I mean, no one's gotten over that heartbreak. But do you see this as a precursor? I mean, what the hell's going on? I feel like,
I'm really worried about this. I'm worried it's a harbinger of things to come within academic institutions. I mean, on one side of the argument, they're saying that, well, it's not that we're destroying it, we're just moving it to another place. Well, no one place can really absorb a collection of that size. It is the second largest collection out of private, universities in the US, second to Harvard. It's a huge collection. But what's most disturbing is that, it's not just a collection that will be moved. It will be the expertise, those faculty lines, the five faculty that have really been integral to that. As they retire, they will not be replaced. And so you'll no longer have such a school of excellence for training in biodiversity research just the time that we are facing huge
I
threats to extinction of 45% of our flowering plants. I mean, we desperately must train the next generation of scientists that can study and document biodiversity. I think a lot of this is driven by the economic models of universities, which are very technologically focused,
uh-huh.
and this that into areas that may generate more grant income. But
Yes.
I mean, herbaria are a tried and true method. They're
Yeah.
so important. We've been using them for over 500 years, and with good reason. There aren't many areas of science where we continue to use a technique for 500 years, and I
Because it,
don't think this is
yeah, because
because
it,
it works, and this is not the century to get rid of that when we're right at the verge of,
I
like,
mean,
major
I
challenges.
just had like visions of, burning the libraries at Alexandria or the
Yeah,
book of the Aztecs or whatever. And it's so foolhardy. So I hope, I'll lend my voice to it as well. And, we
thank
hope,
you.
that with your inspiring voice that we can maybe change some minds. I dare say it's because people don't understand or know. So a lack of knowledge.
Yes, I think you're right. I mean, I don't think it's a lack of interest. I think that's important to distinguish. I think it's a lack of we're not communicating it enough. And I think that people are interested. People are concerned about the environment. I mean, who wants to live in a world lacking in biodiversity? You know, I don't want to live in a world where there are no new flowers to smell or look at or aromas to enjoy. I mean, it's key to human happiness and it's key to our food web.
It
As
is.
we lose these species, if we can't study these species,
Yes.
right? It's kind of, what is that saying? The adage of, when the last tree in the wood falls and no one's there to document or see it, we'll never know what's lost. I mean, we have to have this has to be a part of education. We can't let go of this, especially not at this time.
Well, I'm going to be hopeful about that element, even though sometimes I'm crying in my food prison, the way we see the world. But I know we have too much of a monoculture with everything. But
Mhm.
is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want? Because I know your time is precious also.
Yeah, I guess I would just say if folks are interested in learning more about the work that we do, they can head over. I've got some resources online. So you mentioned the Nature's Pharmacy Substack, and we have both free and paid versions of membership there. I'm on social media on Instagram at Quave Ethnobot, and also on Twitter or X at Quave Ethnobot, on Facebook at Dr. Cassandra Quave. Um, you can find the Foodie Pharmacology resources at foodiepharmacology.com. And yeah, and if you're interested in the book, I definitely encourage you to support your local bookseller. It's available everywhere. If you want to read it in Japanese or in Mandarin, it's also available in those languages. And it's also an audiobook. So if you like,
Oh, that's
I've gotten to where I love audiobooks, and I actually did the audio myself. So you
oh,
can
I love
listen
that.
to my voice if that's of interest. And it's called The Plant Hunter, a Scientist's Quest for Nature's Next Medicine. And it was rated as one of the best books of 2021 by Kirkus Reviews. That's kind of my little
I,
claim to excitement on that.
That's huge. I know the Kirkus books, and that's, I do have to say, I love audiobooks also. I use them on my wellness walks, but this one I wanted to be able to mark up,
Yeah,
myself. So sometimes plus I wanted to be able to buy the book, but I get people, if you don't know, you can get them also from the libraries and,
absolutely.
your big, books or whatever. But I think this is a good entry for people to learn more about ethnobotany and as well as your life. I hope we meet in real life too, but because you're just fascinating and very inspiring. And I'm just so honored that you took the time to be with us and tell us more about this.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and your audience. And like I said, I love the decor and all the plants. It makes me
I know.
happy just looking at your stands. I was there in person to enjoy a cocktail with all
Yeah.
those lovely plants and decorations.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye, Doc. Bye, Cassandra. I can say
Bye.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.